we heard already several very interesting projects this morning. Also at the European level, there is support for innovation and innovation around technology and sustainability in fashion. And so we have the honor and the pleasure to have some of these European projects who will present the results of their research. First, we start with two persons from Belgium, Buyle and Lien van der Schueren from Centexbel. They are located in Ghent, and the name of their project is Herewear. And actually, they were here, but I didn't see you. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, welcome all, and you'll have to do with me today. So I will give the presentation, and if there are questions, of course, my colleague will also be able to answer. So I'm very happy to be here and to be able to present to you the Herewear project. I can imagine, first of all, what is actually Herewear. So as Annick already said, we are a European research project funded by the European Commission Horizon 2020 project, where we are cooperating with lots of partners onto a common goal. And as a common goal, we have something which I think is very valuable and has been shown to be valuable throughout the presentations we already had and throughout the debates. It's to have a local, a sustainable, a circular way of using our textiles for clothing applications. And as you can see, and as you all know, on one side of the figure, you see how the fashion industry is working mostly still at this moment. We have the production of the raw materials, for example, in the Middle East. Then we have the production of the clothing in Asia. And then finally, the garments go to Europe, where they're being sold. And after their use life, they often still go to incineration or landfill, which is, of course, not at all sustainable. So what we want to obtain and what we want to support, at least with the Herewear project, is to changes to a circular way of using our clothing. So we want to work circular, and we think if you want to do this within Europe even, you will need to work locally. And this was also already mentioned in different talks, that we really need to stay in a local way in order to be able to work sustainably. So that's why we have these different circles spread over Europe. So that's a bit the common goal of the Herewear project. So as said, we want to have sustainable clothing, and we will base this on three different pillars. We have the circularity, we have the local production, but also we want to work with bio-based materials. So getting away from the fossil-based materials, which are still being used really a lot in the textile industry. So I'll just go a bit more into detail into each of these three pillars and what we will exactly do within the Herewear project. So the first one is circularity. And here, one of our partners, UAL, will develop circular design guidelines. They're also taking into account the bio-based materials. What's also, of course, important is to have an optimized use, reuse, repair of our clothing to have them as long as possible within their life cycle. And in order to support the brands, the designers, how to do this, we will also further develop the software tools. We have some partners available in the consortium which are working on this software, and they will further develop this, further focusing on circularity and bio-based. Within this, also the labeling, how can we be sure that what we have is indeed circular? Also, this will be part of the Herewear project. And of course, if you want to have something circular, you also want to avoid unintended release of materials. That's why also minimization of microfibers being released into the environment is a part of the project. Then we have the second pillar, which is on the bio-based. So here we want to use materials which are bio-based. And as a first, we know that cotton polyester is very often used in the textile industry. So our goal is to have an alternative for these two materials which are very much used. So for the cotton, we will work with cellulose coming from bio-based sources, like for example straw or even manure. And then for the polyester, we will work with a biopolyester having the same properties or similar properties to the standard polyester that's being used in clothing. After that, of course, also all the after treatments which are being applied to the textiles, like coating, printing, dyeing, also these will be bio-based. Then as a final pillar, we have the local. So we want to work locally, to have a network manufacturing and to have actually micro factories, which can go from a fabric to a final garment locally at small scale. Of course, if you want to realize this, you need a community, you need actors, you need companies who can support that. So that's why we will build a community of like-minded actors in order to be able to reach our goals. And then I just want to show here a bit how the circular value chain of the Herewear project is looking like and all the partners which are involved. Because of course we have many things to tackle. So that's why we also need many partners to support this idea. So we start from biomaterials, we go to the production of yarns. After that, we go to the fabrics and the garments. Once we have the garments, we will also have focus on the repair of these garments, on the reuse of these materials, and then finally, how to best recycle them, having the circularity in mind and having all the knowledge of the garment in order to recycle as best as possible. And then, of course, I didn't introduce a lot where I'm working from, so I just want to give you some insights of the company I'm working for, which is Centexbel, and why we are coordinating this kind of project. So we are actually a research center located in Belgium with a strong focus on textiles. We are in total with about 180 people, and we are doing some different activities being spread over testing, where we have all kinds of testing laboratories to do chemical testing, physical testing on textile materials. Also, we have pilot platforms to make some coating, some finishing, some extrusion at a pilot scale to support companies working on this. Besides that, we have, of course, the research, which is of importance, and then we also have our services. And I just will go a bit more into detail still on the services. What this actually means. This means, for example, consultancy regarding technical results, regarding improvement of their processes. Also, ecology is important, like, for example, REACH. But also we have some labeling, some certification, like Ecotex, where we also look if the textiles, the clothing are being made in ethical circumstances. So this also relates to what has been told this morning. Further, we follow up, for example, the norms, the standards which are being developed in Europe and also support our companies into this. And then, of course, why are we a coordinator? If we look to our research and innovation strategy, we try to be close to the industry. And of course, we all know in industry, sustainability is becoming more and more important, being tackled by different ways, like, for example, circularity, like the use of recycled materials, and then also the use of biomaterials. And that, of course, are two main parts or two main things which are being worked on in the Herewear project. And then I just want to mention our statement, which actually says that the textile industry is a very fascinating landscape with lots of interesting, passionate people. And we are always happy to encounter these people, like we, of course, have here at this conference. So this as a general intro on the Herewear project and on Centexbel. Let's then have a look to some first activities which have been done within the project. So we run now for about 1 year. So we don't have, of course, all results so far, but we can already give some insights. So as a first, I'll just go a bit more into detail into the sample collection, which has been done by our partner UAL, University of Arts London, which you also see on top, Becky and Leticia, who showed actually some results of this sample collection. So here the goal was to have a look to what's already there. So what is there on bio-based materials, what is existing, what is emerging, and what can we learn from them, of course. So we gathered lots of materials, and then we also checked how are they in their development phase. Can we already use them now? Can we use them within the near future, or is it still rather far? So this was the first to see how are these materials already available. And then secondly, which was also developed, is a kind of life cycle, a material wheel of all these bio-based materials. And here the goal was really to go over the full life cycle of these materials, their feedstock, their manufacturing processes, and then their end of life, containing repair, reuse, but then also the recycling or even the biodegradation. And then actually the goal is to see what are the different parts within the life cycle and where can designers take some actions or have to take into account in order to be more circular. And for each of the material inside the library, we then ticked the boxes where they are working on, which are valid for these materials. So this as a insights on the material library. And then also some work which has been done at Centexbel, which was then actually on the development of these polyester yarns, which are not anymore fossil-based, but bio-based. And in this way, it is also better for the environment. As a material, we chose as main material polylactic acid, PLA, because this is a bio-based material which is already quite well available and also at a reasonable cost, because of course that's also something to take into account. However, if you make something out of the PLA yarns, the feel, the comfort is not that good. So that's why we blended with other biopolyesters in order to improve these comfort properties. This was actually very successful, so we could make yarns out of these biopolyester blends, having better comfort properties. And I have some of the samples with me. If you would be interested to feel them once, you can come to me after the talk. What's also a part of the work which has been done already is then on the bio-based coating. So as said, not only the materials, but also the coating, the finishing should be bio-based. So here we worked with also PLA and another biopolyester PHA-based coatings in order to develop a biodegradable, bio-based coating having much less plasticizer and microplastics release and still having good abrasion properties. What we still have to improve a bit during the project is the washing resistance, because if we start washing, after some time, we do see some effect there. But of course, we still have time within the project to improve. And then what's also nice to show is that within the project, we have some partners which are working on corporate wear and street fashion. So these are actually our two main prototypes which we want to obtain by the end of the project. Of course, to develop these prototypes, we have to run through the full value chain with all the partners involved, and this can be quite challenging. That's why we thought, let's, in the first year of the project, already try to make a kind of a prototype to see how this works. So we chose actually for children's wear, not because we want to develop something for children in the end, but of course, as you can imagine, we need much less material to develop something for a small baby than for an adult. So that's why we chose for that. And we already involved quite some of our partners within our value chain. So as a first, we had Maibine and Bretena to develop a design which was giving zero waste. So if you would make the dress after cutting, you would not have any waste left. And secondly, we produced, of course, yarns, which were in this case 100% PLA based. Then we had the weaving being done by our partner Eurecat. And then we also put a print on top of the dress. And then, of course, we had the garment manufacturing, which was done by Midwell. And as mentioned, we also want to be circular. We want to be transparent in our way of working. So we have our partner Circular Fashion, who is working on this traceability, on the visibility of what we are working on. So that's why we also included a button containing all information on the production processes, on the materials which have been used. And in the end, we ended up with a dress, which you can see here on the picture. Of course, it's not yet perfect, which is logic because we are only there working on the project for 1 year. But at least we see we can run through the cycle and we can make something which looks quite well. Then as a final of our first activities within the Herewear project, I want also to mention something about the community which we are building. So as said, in order to change and to transform to a more circular textile economy, we need to change and we need to change together. So we really need actors over the full value chain, going from designers to manufacturers to people working on the end of life. So that's why we set up a community, and the goal is that you will get some access. The people entering the community will get some access to dedicated information. They will be able to get into contact more with our project partners. And also, if you, for example, want to test the new software, we will try to get engaged with our community for a test phase. So if you would be interested to join our community, it's completely for free, so it doesn't cost any money. You're always very welcome to join the community, which you can find on the website of the Herewear project. And then I just want to end with some take-home messages of my talk. So first of all, we really found out that making this material library, that many bio-based textiles already exist, and that they are very interesting to be used for textile or clothing applications. Also, if you look to our first activities, which we already did within the Herewear project, we really saw that also technically it's feasible to make a bio-based textile clothing, which is being made locally. Of course, if we want to make clothing more sustainable, we need innovation covering lots of disciplines. So that's why working together is really important. So then, of course, warmly invited to join the community and to work together on this topic. So thanks a lot for having the opportunity, and also thanks to all the project partners for their input for this talk. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we can share the link so that it's nice to promote this invitation. Now we are going to listen to another European project that is in the just ended or in the last phase, and I'm really looking forward to that. I heard a lot about it already. It's about fish skins. So, and the team that worked together the previous years was Elisa Palomino, Ori Topaz, Anna Solo, Ayelet Karmon, and Anna Cordoba Crespo. It's a team from the University of the Arts London and CIRTex and the Israel Center for Innovation and Research in Textiles. So may I invite you to come for your presentation, please.
Where do I change the slides? Here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it doesn't work. Okay. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ori Topaz. I'm an interdisciplinary designer. Okay. I'm an interdisciplinary designer and a researcher from CIRTex at Shenkar College in Israel. CIRTex is the Center for Innovation and Research in Textiles, and we are the coordinator of a Horizon 2020 RISE project called Fiskin, developing Fiskin as a new sustainable raw material for the fashion industry. So the work that we are going to share with you today is part of a collaborative effort that was done under the project. Thank you, Ori. And I'm Elisa Palomino, fashion print lecturer at Central St. Martin's, and also researcher at the University of the Arts. And as Ori was saying, this project has been going on since 2019. We work with 7 different partners. There are academic and non-academic. And we're trying to make fish leather become much more sustainable. Nordic Fish Leather, which is one of the partners who is working with us. They've been working since 1994, developing fish leather, which is actually an Arctic material that Icelanders used to use in the past, like to make shoes. And we've been working with Nordic Fish Leather to make the leather much more sustainable, both in the tanning process, natural dyeing, and also some different finishes like ink-based, water-based ink, the index for printing. What I'm going to be working and talking today, it's also related with my work on my PhD that I've been working for the past 5 years. I've been working with different Arctic indigenous communities on the subject of fish skin, and basically how all these different communities, like departing from the northeast of China, the Herewear, and then through the Amur River, connecting with the Nanai and the Nifk, all the way to the Ainu in the Hokkaido island of Japan and Sakhalin of Russia, and then going all the way up to Alaska, the Inuit people of Alaska and Canada, then Iceland and the Sami of Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And all these different people had one thing in common, and it was like they used to dress up themselves with fish skins. For all these different indigenous communities, they were very much in contact with nature. And indeed, all of them were working with all the materials which were available to them. They were like communities of like hunters and gatherers. And basically they live near the rivers, and they had an economy subsistence of fishing and fishing for salmon. But unfortunately for the Ainu indigenous people of the island of Hokkaido in Japan, when the Japanese arrived during the Meiji period, and through the colonization and the process of assimilation, they banned their traditional fishing, and they were no longer able to fish for salmon. And for them, salmon was not only their bounty and the main source of food, but also it was like a source of spiritualness as well. They were very much connected with nature. And from everything that they were like harvesting, they were making their clothes as well. So basically, what we're looking today is at like how all these Ainu indigenous people were connected with nature, and how through that nature relationship, they were developing all these different clothing. And we're just going to be showing to you different analog and also some traditional ways of creating patterns and so on, and also combining with like some contemporary way of working with pattern cutting.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the reasons we were looking into to bring computational tools to work with fish skin became from the understanding that fish for food consumption is growing worldwide, and it will continue to grow in the next decades. So we realized that if we really want to make an impact and we want to make fish skin usable in the fashion industry, we really need to work with the existing tools and to customize them and to develop them further, so we can create the infrastructure to absorb the use of fish skin in the work process. So basically, we realized that if we want to make the growing blue economy communicate with the changing fashion industry, then we can. So if we can do that, then we can really make an impact, because tons of fish skins will be recycled instead of being thrown away. So the fish skin, it has a unique trapezoid shape with two longer sides and two shorter ones. And with modern tanning, it usually comes in pair because it's cut at the backbone. And this has an opportunity for a nice symmetry also with the garment construction. We started by looking at the Ainu rope, and we realized that they used it as a building block. And this also became a key point in our work as well, to use it as a module and to work with this module to create these continuous semicircular and triangular surfaces according to the design. So another thing that we notice is that they usually place the shorter part of the skin to face the waistline. I'm talking about the bottom part of the rope, and then it created these triangular voids that they would fill in with a smaller piece of skin. What we did is we used the Cloth 3D software, and we recreated this part of the garment, but instead of filling in the voids, we digitally sewn them together as darts to create this three-dimensional volume you see on the right. Another example is with the layer of the skin like that is the flare that it creates at the bottom. And in some incident, even more flare was created by placing more and more skins like that. So we try to imitate this technique with the design of this panel skirt, because we wanted to demonstrate the compatibility of the trapezoid to create these semicircular structures here, but also in other designs as well. And then another example, okay, sorry. I have to go back. Okay, and another example is this classic fitted dress. Here we use the trapezoid in different direction to complement the circumferences of the body, the waist, bust, and hip lines. And this was actually a very, it worked really well because these vertical lines allow us to enable us to take in or take out the material to fit the body quite well. I'm not sure why the video is not working. And then the last pattern making example I'm going to share today is the godet dress that is presented here. So here we did something different. We cut the skins in half to create this volume, but it also actually created a better tiling of the skins. So just to summarize the idea of behind the pattern cutting, the pattern making, we use this classic example to show the potential that the trapezoid shape has when it comes to contemporary pattern making. And then another important aspect in the fashion production line happens at the cutting table. It's referred as nesting, which basically means placing all the small parts of the pattern in an optimal manner on the continuous surface. And this actually has a very important relation to our work because optimal nesting creates reduced amount of pre-consumer waste. And there's actually a lot of work being done on it by engineers and scientists to improve algorithms to get to the maximized use of the surface. And with the fish skin, we encounter the reverse problem because the continuous sheet here is our pattern, and then the small pieces is the material in use. So we had to develop a reverse nesting technique. So I'm briefly going to go over the methodology we used in order to achieve that. We started by scanning the skins. We used only salmon skins for this case study. We used the digitizer by Optitex. And then we placed the skin on a grid, a parametric grid, and that helped us define the locked trapezoid within each skin. And then the next stage was sorting. Now, sorting is important because it's also reduces waste, but it's important here for another reason, because fish during cultivation, they also are being sorted out according to their size and weight. So we think that there is an opportunity here to connect between, so that the computational tools will connect between the cultivation of the fish to create an inventory of tan skin. And then on the middle picture here, you see the locked trapezoid, the 4-point outline. And then the last thing is the automated connection, joining the skins together according to the semicircular shape. And then my last point here is that we wanted to show the potential when it comes to fish skin, but we think that the potential here is much greater than that, because if we look around, parametric fashion and zero waste fashion are already out there looking for prominent ways, and they usually are carefully crafted from small pieces of material. So if we are able to introduce these computational tools, then we can probably make a real environmental impact.
So the next stage was basically creating an Ainu fish skin avatar, and also a garment to do it on Clothes 3D. So basically, as you know, like Cloud 3D, I mean, it's pretty new in the market. So if you look at the avatars that are available, they're usually like white, men or female, or blonde and blue eyes, and so on. So we really did a research on different archives in order to look for different photographies and paintings, etc., in order to get the right features. Because the Ainu Indigenous people of Hokkaido Island in Japan, they are very different from the Japanese neighbors. They're much more hairy, and wavy hair and so on. So just we look into that. And one of my Central St. Martin's fashion print students, Ana Cordoba, was in charge of creating both the avatar and the garment as well. So what is interesting is when you work in with the patterns as well and how you can develop different things. And this was part of the research that I did during my Fulbright scholarship at the Smithsonian Institution at the National Museum of Natural History. While I was going through all the different archives with Stephen Loring, the main curator there, I was looking at, Alaskan Inuit indigenous artifacts, but I was also looking at subarctic artifacts, in this case, Ainu, and they have an incredible collection as well. He knew how much I loved Japanese art, and while we were looking at this specific Ainu Atouche on the left-hand side, I realized that, it had a katatsome indigo print, which is actually Japanese, and it's not Ainu. So researching later on different Ainu Atouche. In the past, the Ainu would use like elm bark yarns in order to make this atouche. But when the Japanese arrived in Hokkaido, what happened? They would bring in cotton, which was the fiber that the Ainu had never used before. And they would also use the used kimonos. They will bring them over and they will trade it with the Ainu for different sort of things. So in this case, these Ainu seamstress would have used an old kimono with a katatsome indigo print, and she would have added all these beautiful embroideries on top of it. So the idea behind this project was like, I'd ask myself, what would have happened if the Japanese, instead of just coming and getting rid of the Ainu culture, they would have collaborated with them and they would have just merged both cultures. They would have teach the Ainu how to katatsome indigo dye the fish skins, and then the Ainu could have carried on doing the fish skin beautiful garments also with the Ainu katatsome techniques. So basically, what we did, we created digitally the indigo katatsome Ainu robe. And working with Cloth 3D means like you're almost working on the dummy. So basically you pin in your fabric, in this case, the fish skins, and you could almost print it or dye with indigo, but just with one mouse click. So this was quite interesting as well, getting their proportions, etc. And right after that, what we did was recreating what would have been a scene of the past. And another colleague of mine, John Cloud, also from the Arctic Studies Center, he provided some Japanese rare books from the Library of Congress. And we look at those books and the illustrations in order to create the boat and the avatar of the Ainu elder. It was important to feature this person as an elder because, as we know, everything comes from the elder knowledge and all the skins and how they get passed on within generations. And again, from these trapezial fish skins, we created the final garment. And then the next step was to, on another field trip to Japan, I worked with an indigo master dyer, Takayushi Ishii, and he's one of the 4 masters left in Japan. I'm still doing the traditional indigo dyeing. He grows his own indigo leaves. He produces the sukumo, and he has his own indigo vats. And he's a really young guy. It was amazing to work with him because usually when you work with Japanese masters, they're very strict about their techniques. They really follow traditions. But he was really happy for me to dip in the skins into the indigo vat, which would have been a no-no for any other Japanese crafter. So this was really interesting. And we've been working for the past 3 years together. Even during lockdown, for me, sending him the skins and so on. And working with him, I follow the whole process from making the katagami stencils, which are actually made of mulberry paper. You coat them with this persimmon who's been fermented in order to make them waterproof. And then we also make our own paste made out of glutinous rice. And it was incredible to see how he was printing. He had an amazing movement of his wrist in order to print the paste. And then once you dip in the skins into the indigo vat, you take them out, you rinse them, and then the final design comes out. So this was a really, really interesting process. And then to end up the process, during all my field trips in the past 5 years, I've been working with numerous indigenous people in all these different areas. I've been asking them. I've been also bringing students from all these different areas, like Japanese to Hokkaido, Chinese to Herze, and then the same thing in Icelanders and Nordic people into Iceland, etc. And we've been learning different things, both natural tanning techniques, but also pattern cutting techniques, etc. Also working with museum curators and having original patterns of the pieces that they have into the archives has been really, really interesting. So the last stage was to create this fishskin Ainu replica. And in order to do that, I work with Vanna Bellini. She used to be the head of the atelier at Valentino Haute Couture. But she actually went herself to work almost following the same techniques like these Ainu seamstress would have done in the past. So there was no waste. We were puzzling all the different pieces front to back and so on in order to create this zero waste pattern cutting that the Ainu people were doing already at the time. And what is really important to notice as well that everything is being done with extreme respect from all the different communities that have been working for the past 5 years. Something that is really important is always to acknowledge where the knowledge comes from and where all these different skills are coming and how they've been passing on, because they belong to them and they are actually the owners of the skill and the knowledge for all these different generations. And another thing that is really important as well is like, how can we learn from these communities and their respect for nature? Because if we think about what's happening right now, I mean, all the big global climate crisis is not the indigenous communities who have created, but us. So if we would really be able to follow how they're still following nature, we will be in a different situation. So hopefully that would be helpful as well for fashion and sustainability to learn from all these different indigenous groups.
And this is an invitation to join us tomorrow for an online workshop on cloth 3D. Anna Solo, our colleague, is going to give it online from Shenkar in Israel. So she's going to demonstrate the basic tool of cloth 3D, and then later on, all participants will be able to download their own avatar wearing an Ainu rope and design it to and be playful with their designs. And also, you can see the rope replica at the exhibition.
And just to finish, we just really would love to thank all the different people, like all the different partners from the EU Horizon project, the Arctic Studies Center at the Smithsonian Institution, Israel Council for Higher Education, the Nordic Fish Leather Tannery, and all the different museums, curators, and indigenous groups who have been working with us in this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Amazing. It gives all these new projects give me a lot of energy. Yeah. So I can repeat the invitation to go to the Winter Garden to see the project, and then tomorrow you have the workshop with fishkins. The third project of this afternoon session is a Belgian company, and Cédric Vanhoeck, you are representing the company, I think, a young company, with Rawaa, Ammar, William Allouche, Leon Besson, Beaugeois. Is it well pronounced? Yeah. And the name of the company is Ressortexs, and you're based in Brussels. And the rest you can explain.
Hello everyone. I'm Cédric and I'm the executive lead of Ressortexs. Recycling made easy. I first want to start with a general thought of mine, is that Yes, that's better. So I just want to start with a general thought of mine, is that if in this room only sustainable fashion was allowed, that probably all of us would be naked right now, because as long as we cannot process garments at end of life and so recycle them, for example, there is no such thing as sustainable fashion, although we are using sustainable materials. And so before getting further into that story, what I want to speak about here together with you today is our comparative life cycle assessment that we did on the disassembly and recycling processes, specifically for closed-loop denim production. But before, again, going to that life cycle assessment, I'm first going to introduce briefly to you what we do at Ressortexs. But in quick, what we do is making recycling of garments possible at industrial scale and at a higher quality. As you may know, 1% of, or less than 1% of garments are today effectively recycled. And that's one of the key reasons why the fashion industry emits 10% of the global emissions on a yearly basis. It also represents $500 billion worth of materials that we are losing or wasting every single year as well. What is even more shocking is that 30% of garments are even wasted before they are sold or used, because up to 10% of garments are never reaching the stores because the production, these are overproduced and so are remaining in the factories. And 20% of garments on average never are sold at the end of the season, so they remain in the shops. To give you an example, a company as H&M in 2019 was struggling with a stack of unsold inventory worth of $4.3 billion. Their average product price is $15, just to give you an idea of how many garments this is. And recycling garments is complicated, right? It is difficult. And it's because the disassembly of garments is difficult. If you want to manually dismantle garments, it's way too expensive and it's too time consuming. And the mechanical recycling processes or disassembly processes, they are harming the textiles. And so this results inevitably in downcycling processes. So up to now, I don't think we can say that this is a really bright story, but we developed a global patented solution where we hope to be able to solve this, and that we are currently testing with more than 25 international fashion brands, of which some of them are listed here. What is the solution specifically? Well, we allow you to disassemble garments 5 times faster, and this specifically by simply changing the stitching thread. So I repeat, we don't change anything in design, we just change the stitching thread. This thread melts down at specific temperatures, and this allows you to make seams automatically disappear. The benefit is that you don't have to change anything in production or design, and that you can still wash, iron, and dry your garments as usual. Our patented disassembling ovens, on the other hand, they will ensure the quality and the scale of this disassembly. They can process up to 13 tons of garments per day. We do have today a disassembling oven that can process 1 ton per day that is based in Brussels and that is operational since this month. There is no damage on the textiles because they're being developed in such a way that there is almost no oxygen in the oven, so there is no oxidation and so no degradation of the textiles neither. And the closed loop heating system makes sure that we don't overproduce as well or consume energy to dismantle those garments, so we maintain this consumption as low as possible. So with this whole system, we want to make fashion fit the circular economy. And so what it means is that a garment maker just buys thread, the Ressortexs thread, fashion brands will pay a circularity fee. And with this be able to market circular, 100% circular garments, but also reach sustainability targets and reduce costs, because this is really interesting. Circular economy is cheaper than conventional production. So I have good news here to tell to all of you. And then on the other hand, we do have the recyclers that will buy those ovens and then will be able to dismantle those garments made with the thread. And this allows them to tap into high volumes, especially high quality textiles in the case of pre-consumer garments, that they can process back to fibers that can then be used in the production of a new sustainable garment. So this life cycle assessment was based to be able to assess this complete loop and to see if the heating process, this disassembly, etc., was really beneficial. It was not harming more than solving the problem that we tried to solve. And so what we did was to check the different disassembly and recycling processes that exist. So we take a raw denim. So we decided to not work with bleached denim because the bleaching process of a denim doubles the emissions of a denim as well. And so that would also, in the recycling process, you don't need to bleach them again, and then that would alter the results. So we just took raw denim, just dyed, not bleached. And then we look to what is possible once the denim is produced. What can we do to dismantle and prepare it for recycling? And there are three options. There is manual disassembly, which I already told you it's really slow and quite costly. There is a mechanical disassembly, which has the tendency to destroy the quality of the textiles. And then there's a thermal disassembly, which is our process. And then we combine this with existing recycling processes. The first one we checked was a mechanical recycling process, which is basically shredding down the fibers, getting to fiber, and then carding, spinning those back into yarn. So that is recycling, mechanical recycling. And then chemical recycling is depolymerization and repolymerization of materials. This can be the bio-based materials, viscose processes. Over in the case of polyester, this can be enzyme depolymerization of polyester, for example. And then you can get to pellets or fibers and filaments to then make again yarn. And then the purify recycling process is a process that is based here in Belgium. In Waregem, it's Concordia Textiles that has a joint venture with Purify, which is an American technology. And they managed to have a hybrid between a chemical and mechanical recycling process for cotton, for example, where they call it slow cooking and reversed spinning, but they managed to recycle fibers without losing too much of the quality. And so you get to fibers of higher quality than in normal classic mechanical shredding that you can then card again and spin back to yarn. So this is what we calculated in short. To look to the product boundary system, we take the extraction of the materials into account of the first denim. We go to the material component making. We go then to the garment confection or making. We stop up to the moment it's delivered in the store because we don't want to take the use of the garment into account neither. I mean, washing machines and ironing of garments don't have anything to do with the efficiency of recycling. So this is excluded. And then we directly go to end of life. So you could consider that we calculated the life cycle of an unsold garment. And then in the end of life cycle, option one is the most current or the most used option, incineration or landfill. And then the other options is to see if we can make a mix in those different disassembly processes with those different recycling processes. And what we found out is that the key to enhancing recycling lies in the optimization of those disassembly and sorting processes. So if you look to manual disassembly, for example, you waste up to 52% of the garments before you can recycle the materials. But the benefit, of course, is that you don't damage the textile. So you keep the fibers in the textiles that were cut out quite intact. But there is a lot of waste. Mechanical disassembly, it's only 30% waste, but you have the down part that your fiber pieces or the fibers of the textiles you recuperate are of lower quality. And the third option with thermal disassembly is that for trousers, we have 90% efficiency, so only 10% of the trousers is wasted in the process, and there is no material damage. So already there lies a big impact in the results by just avoiding waste in your disassembly process, because the waste in the disassembly processes are often incinerated or landfilled, especially in manual disassembly, because this is what you have on this slide. is that the difference there is also where they are done, so the geographies. Manual disassembly is done in Pakistan mainly, or in African countries, because it's so expensive that in Europe we don't have the capacity for that. So we're literally shipping old garments from the European continent or the American continent to Pakistan to cut them out and then ship them back to the most innovative recycling lines that we have here in Europe or in the US. So there is a huge impact in the transportation of this waste in the manual disassembly process, which you don't have, of course, in the mechanical and the thermal process, which are based in Europe. And so the results are quite interesting. We can reduce up to 50% of the CO2 of a pair of raw denims in case we work with the most optimal combination compared to the benchmark of incineration of the trousers. So a trousers raw denim is around 13 kilograms of CO2 in our assessment. This was done with the IPCC method of 2013 with a 20-year impact calculation. So to be a little bit scientific here as well. But so you see that we can reduce, when we combine thermal with purified recycling, 50% of the impact of a denim. But that, of course, is simple. We say like, yeah, this is a bad situation. Let's look to the best situation. Let's also compare now the different disassembly methods in combination with the different recycling methods and see if we change just the disassembly method on an existing recycling method, if there really is an impact there. So let's start. So we see 16 to 33% CO2 reductions, CO2 emission reductions by just changing from manual disassembly to thermal disassembly. So if we take the example of the mechanical recycling, we can reduce 3 kilograms. This is 16% reduction. We can go down with manual disassembly. With chemical recycling there as well, we have plus minus a 3 kilogram reduction. As the emissions are lower, the percentage is, of course, higher. And then we have, again, the purify, where we do have the highest CO2 reduction potential by just switching from a manual process to a thermal and more local process. When we compare the mechanical disassembly with, again, the same recycling methods, we can reach up to 42% CO2 reductions. So, and this is, you visit here, so for example, 16 to 15 kilogram in comparing mechanical recycling. Again, with the Purify, we have much more efficiencies in this because the recycling process is also much more efficient, where we can reach that 42% CO2 reduction. So overall, in the nice scenarios, you see that in some cases, recycling is even more polluting than incineration with energy recuperating, which is already interesting to see. Then what is also nice to see, especially with the next slides where we are going into ecotoxicity and water consumption, is that mechanical recycling in CO2 is a bad student. But then, for example, on toxicity levels, it's a better student. So there is also, depending on how you look to those recycling processes and the combinations, you will see different results. But on average, you can say that the disassembly processes, the more efficient you can make those, the more efficient you can make the recycling process afterwards as well. So again, 50% maximum reduction, 43% maximum reduction in comparing to the same recycling process. So to water reduction, 98% land use is 95%. So land use means that we can theoretically bring back land to reforestation, not deforestation, and agriculture. Interesting numbers there as well. Ecotoxicity, you see this as well. So if you look to number 3, which is chemical, you see that it's peaking higher. Number 4 is then purify again, and it's going lower. The same what you see with water. What is really interesting is that you see that number 2, 5, 6 are quite high, and 3, 4, 8, 9 are low. This is because once you get into chemical recycling or with the purify recycling, you don't need new material. You don't need virgin material to be added to your fiber to make the second garment. And as you don't need virgin material, you don't need all the land, and you don't need the water to water your cotton growth. So that is where the major water reduction comes from, is just because you don't need virgin material in the making of the new garment. So let's make this a little bit more granular. If we for one denim, if I can recycle and disassemble in the most efficient combination, so the Ressortexs purify process, what do I really save? Well, you will save 200 euros in ecotoxicity remediation costs. So to get out carcinogenic emissions out of nature, this is what it represents. This is not the cost that a brand has on its P&L, so it's not something that they will consider. It's something that society has as a cost in general. Then you can save 35 showers by saving one denim, and then you can get 560 meals with the equivalent of the land use that you saved by doing this. This is really, you could say, a small change, because the disassembly of a garment is not such a big difference, especially if you can just heat up a garment and you just switch the stitching threads you use. There is no big deal there, and the impact is quite big. So we had now the environmental results. We know that this can reduce 50% of CO2 in the entire supply chain as well. But other benefits that are often overlooked are the economic ones. As a recycler can tap into twice more material, there is more volume to process. But on top of that, it's 11% cheaper to do it than to import to cut off waste from abroad. Today, recyclers, as I said, they're shipping from Pakistan if it's from garments, or they just take cut-off waste from African countries or Asian countries to process them here. This is more expensive than going to circular economy for the recycler. So that means that this is covered. Brands can save 15% of costs by doing this, just by CO2 offsetting optimizations of their supply chain, and simultaneously become best in sustainability class. Just to tell us who is working behind this, you have the email addresses if you want to reach out to them. I leave it on to get a picture. Yes. And then if you want to have the full report, you can scan this QR code. I can share it later on as well. You will be sent to a page where you can then subscribe for a newsletter where this will be sent to you once it will be launched officially, because it's also going to be shared with policymakers. So we are waiting for the due date. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I also melt a little bit your mind with this presentation, as I hope my technology does as well.
Thank you, Cédric. Really impressive, and also nice to see how you measure your own impact. It's really, really nice. Okay. In the beginning, I said there were 3 presentations. My apologies. There is a surprise. There is a 4th one. And may I invite Alexa Pollmann from the London College of Fashion and Peu Porter, and she will explain you the Dazzle Collective.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Alexa Pollmann. I am part of a design collective called Peu Porter. I'm also the subject leader for wearable technology at the London College of Fashion. And today I want to present you an ongoing project. It's also a practice-based design project. So it comes actually from the design collective Peu Porter together with Studio Gibson Martelli, which is called the Dazzle Collective. And the paper I wrote is Collectivism in Fashion, the Evolution of Euro-American Ideals. So, Dazzle Collective really is, for me, more a design probe into alternative forms of producing, consuming, interacting with, but also situating fashion. And it is an offshoot of Dazzle. So Dazzle is actually a mixed reality costume ball that we are currently working on. And it's a showcase that really bridges visual arts with performance and tactile lift experiences in fashion. So the original Dazzle ball, which you see on the left, is actually an historic event that inspired this ongoing project. And it took place in 1919. Now, the visual confusion that the dazzle pattern actually brings is something that we sort of reference in our project because we see parallels to how multiple realities actually kind of confuse our concept of reality today, and especially within the immersive technologies. So the fantastic costumes, though, that were produced for the original Dazzle Ball were made by the audiences that came to the ball. And that was what really inspired us to invite people from around the world to co-create outfits for the Dazzle showcase with us. And those costumes, when you come to the showcase, you get them handed and at the entrance, and you can wear them for the duration of your visit. For all the participants, and we have around 50 now from all over the world, we gave them just a couple of simple principles for our co-design process. And you see some of them here, but we gave them also 2.5 meters of printed fabric, and each of them gets a print designed by us that is unique. And there had to be room for negotiation, of course, but those principles are really what made the project feel cohesive, although it's from all these different makers. And we're aiming for 100 in total, it's ongoing. The outfits all that are being produced so far, they all feature on the website called dazzlecollective.org. And there's also the zero waste pattern, and they all had to use zero waste, that you can download from there. So it's an open source platform to get those patterns. It also shows the design process, and it of course features the makers and designers behind them. There's a tag within the garment. So when people come to the showcase, they can actually know who the person is who made it. And so what we hope is really to connect not just the consumer or the wearer in this case, because they don't really consume them, to the making process, but also the person who made it can see who wore their garment, because we encourage people in the showcase to take a picture of themselves. So we use the social media platforms to actually connect those two agents or reconnect them because they used to be. So in the first instance, we worked with universities. So in Bangladesh, in Singapore, in Germany, and the UK so far. And there are a couple of things that we all kind of took away from our experience and we discussed together. And I just want to highlight 3 of them. So the first one is that, of course, Dazzle is a way for us to explore a different way to consume and interact and define fashion. And the Dazzle Ball, where people will come and wear those outfits, is actually not just a moment of collective experience, which you have when you go to a showcase, but it's even more special so because you actually connect as you wear these outfits together. Secondly, the Dazzle Collective really is a reference to an idealist vision. I shouldn't have gone to this slide yet. And I think this idealist vision is actually the one of shared ownership. And of course, because we release the garments open source, that is one part of it. But also we as designers have to kind of take a step back. And when we co-design, of course, we have to do that. But we are giving away the authorship of this project to all the participants. Now, what we do is that we actually stipulate contracts with all participants where we have them reflect on shared ownership or ownership over time. So I think that concept is a big part of the project altogether. We also freed ourselves from any production schedule, and this was partly due to the nature of the pandemic. But it really strengthened us because it allowed us to just kind of adapt the project to what was possible. And I think it's quite important in that context, and because this project firmly sits within the immersive industries, to say that slow fashion is a term we use quite often these days, very few of us really know what it means, I think, in the end. But also how much time is actually given to fashion projects to evolve. And most of the time, that's something like 6 months. Now, from this being immersed in the immersive industries, it's quite common there that you actually have 3 years or more to work on a project. And I wonder why we cannot take that freedom for us in the design process of fashion. So now actually I'm going to this slide. And this is the next step. So actually apart from working with universities, we also invited 2 studios so far, but both of them are studios that collaborate with local communities. So one is Para and the other is Crespo. And the Dhaka-based design studio Para, so Dhaka in Bangladesh, they started to run workshops with participants from Korai, which is a neighborhood where a lot of the garment factory workers live. And that really brings a different tone to the project because we then engage with their making skills. So we had to adapt and change our rules, for example. And for example, here it's going to be running stitch artists and screen printers who are going to work with us. And then in Otpaso, in Rwanda, Kigali, they will actually see artists hand painting fabrics. So you can see that the local really has made its way into the project, although it's a global project. And what is also important to say is with especially our partner in Kigali, we are trying at the moment to actually turn this into a way of bringing digital and means to the fashion industry there, or the fashion makers there. So they offered that their studio could become a hub where we could sort of co-design in the digital realm. Now, I think that this collective so far has really given us an opportunity to say that we can bridge traditional and local making skills with the digital and the interconnected ways that fashion is performed and produced today. And in zooming out, what we see is really that this is an international alliance of sorts of fashion makers who represent and strengthen the vision of fashion that is simultaneously local and global, simultaneously digital and physical, and it's produced in a quite decentralized way. There's a historic reference to this, and it's the Tuta suit by Ernesto Michaelis, also called Tayat. There's a wonderful essay written by Flavia Lo Schialpo. It's called Utopian Clothing. I really recommend it. And the principles that are instated in the Tuta are really kind of what the Dazzle Collective too has sort of absorbed for itself. And it's especially this open-sourced way of production, because the Tuta suit was printed in a newspaper also in 1919. It was adopted by the masses, and it became quite a luxurious fashion item. And luxurious is actually the wrong word, because it was literally made for all social norms. And I think that the Dazzle Collective for me is really a design probe that offers us a glimpse into the alternative means to practice and consume and interact, but also to distribute fashion. So the challenges and all the sort of modifications that I described in detail in the paper, all of them though stem from a series of influencers. So this is just a historic influence. And one of them was definitely the studios that we collaborate with. And the whole project is really based in a multiverse of creative practices. And I think all of these, of course, have their input. So I think it shows that practice-based research in this sense can have its own means to really start making sense. And however, I want to really stress in the next part, especially Otpaso and Para, our collaborators, because they are, for me, what I would like to establish as collectivism in fashion. And I think that their way of redistributing and decentralizing the power of fashion is something that we should maybe take note from. So the title of my text, of course, has a half question in it, and it's the abolition of Euro-American ideals. And it's sort of contraposition to this idea of collectivism in fashion. Now, the reason that this is formulated in that manner is because there is this belief that our world cultures are situated on a scale between individualism and collectivism. And my question, therefore, sort of reacts to that. And collectivism is something that individualism is something that happens or is supposedly happening in Europe, North America, and Australia mostly. So I really want to highlight, though, that my question is whether we need to critique fashion from this context and understand that Euro-American territories actually have individualism at their roots. So it's the fundamental cultural setting that we produce and consume from. And how can we actually shift away from that? Or can we? So I realized that the term collective at the same time is connotated. And therefore, I was trying to find a different term as I wrote this paper. And I came across one that is called becoming with. And it's this form of becoming with that actually comes from Donna Haraway's book, When Species Meet, that I really see represented in those practitioners that I mentioned before. So Otbaso and Para are one example, but I thought it was also important to bring along another example from Germany, which is people who are based in Berlin. And I thought it would be nice to kind of frame them or give them a space to exist together. So all of them are fashion makers who anchor their production in local communities. And there's 3 conversations with all of them that I reflect on in the paper. But there's a couple of important things that all of them share that I just want to highlight briefly. So one of the issues that we really discussed is that often they are understood as NGOs rather than as businesses. And that is causing a series of problems for them, not just financially, but also in terms of desirability. And if we want to really overcome and transition into alternative forms of making or thinking fashion, we actually might have to start understanding collective organization as relevant, not just to our current crisis, but also as a reliable economic model. And that's something that all of them have managed. But, and again, I want to kind of refer back to the tech industries here, they do that. They have collective structures and decentralized principles. And they actually are very successful platforms that we all use every day. So I'd like to argue actually that Otbaso as well as Para and People are such form of platforms existing in the physical world. But currently we are lacking a bit of an analysis thereof in the grand scheme of fashion. And therefore I see a task in really re-establishing this form of making as innovative, because it also does sustain a decent amount of people, but at the same time it also delivers work that is supportive of existing social and structures and social knowledge. There's a quote from the book Low Tech, which I think some of the people in the room might know. And I think it's really nice to just kind of refer to that in that context. So Designed by Radical Indigenism is the book. And it says that influenced by a confluence of humanism, colonialism, and racism, the mythology of technology ignored local wisdom and indigenous innovation, deeming it primitive. Now, it talks mostly about architectural and agricultural practices, this book. But I think that we find a similar ignorance within the dominant forms of fashion production. So collectivist and community-based fashion really needs to be given room to thrive in the global narrative of fashion. And so that's one thing that I realized mostly in my conversation with Piera from Otbaso. But when I talked to Para, it was interesting because they just started an official fashion platform. And remember the word platform, it's quite interesting actually in that context. And it's called Chol, their new fashion platform. And it really tries to establish Bangladeshi fashion design culture and discourse. And it's interesting because they also try to start what you would maybe call a fashion week in Bangladesh at the moment. And similarly, Piera from Otbaso in Rwanda, she actually says that they are part of something called Collective Rwanda. And they all try to support the local making and community-based fashion thinking that is going on there. And therefore, I think that we really need to look at how we can have these platforms that they established for themselves, or maybe we can learn from them in some way. Then last but not least, I also want to highlight one thing from my conversation with people. And they are really a social fashion project that is based in Berlin. And they create annual editions of design objects, working mostly with kids who struggle. And they are actively involved, those kids, because they are really part of the design and production process. So as we asked them about the idea of being a collective, or whether they would be understanding themselves as a collective, they said that actually they identify their primary task as designers as follows. So they identify, they filter and accompany the ideas of their participants and then help them to transform these into a professional product. And the shift within the role of the designer is one that I think there is a very famous book that really talks about that at length, which is Design When Everybody Designs from Enzo Mazzini. And it's one that I think we need to really bring to fashion as an idea for what is fashion design. We can really kind of reconfigure the education in fashion design around that. But it's not just this shared understanding about the role of design that links those three studios. It also is the symbiosis of creative and social work alongside those locally made products. And the product is actually quite important in that context. But it is also as important as the process itself, because it really helps the collective to come together, but also because it helps to open up and interact with the society. And that is a term that I would like to, again, refer back to, which is becoming with in this thinking. So as we look to transition, I think it seems evident that we really need to shift our focus of underlying systems. So fashion collectives, for me, they really represent an already existing alternative production system, and one that actually builds on networks and establishes training facilities. So it really allows for wide-reaching participation. It uses co-creation to empower not just the individual, but also itself. And it represents fashion to me as what I would like to establish as commoning. And that's a term that I borrow from an essay by Massimo De Angelis. This is what I'm going to finish on. So in these times of reconfiguration, it's this text actually that kind of gave me a bit of hope as well. And it's a vision, I think, to think about how we could produce going further. And currently, there's very much diverging underlying systems of production within and outside the fashion system that are already in place around the globe, really, but they are being overlooked. And I think presenting them is a plausible alternative to how we could actually produce fashion. So it maybe is a bigger job, but it would be great if we could ring fence a space within the fashion landscape that unites these practitioners. And of course, things like the Dazzle Collective, and to propose a sort of evolution from where we're at the moment. Thank you. Oh.
I'm happy to collect some of your questions. Who likes to ask a question? Yes, are there other questions? I will collect the questions and then we go back to the panel. Are there other questions until now? Not, yeah, okay. Andrea as well, okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So first of all, congrats for all the projects. It was really interesting to see. I would have actually two questions. One is for the fish skin pattern project. So you talked about that, of course, like overfishing is quite a big debate today. And my question is, don't you see the risk that this kind of new project will actually incentivize more for overfishing, and in the end we would actually create like a bigger problem with that. That's just one question. And for the other one is the Dazzle Collective. If I understood well, it's really introducing the social aspect of like the fashion. But I'm very interested in whether you have some kind of study, like what is the environmental footprint, like what kind of materials do you use? Is it green enough? Basically, that's it. These are my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, the micro is there.
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot, definitely. And I just want to reassure you that, for instance, Nordic Fish Leather, which is the company that we work with, they only work with waste of fish skin. So basically, they work with sushi restaurants, they work with many companies who actually do filleting of salmon skins. And they only work with companies within the area, like in the Faroe Islands or in Iceland. And I don't think it will. I mean, I think the market's still really slow. There's not that many companies using the fish skin. And on the other hand, we didn't talk about that. But I mean, one thing that the fish leather could be actually taking over the exotic leathers, like snake skin, which are very, very similar. And actually where you actually don't even eat the snakes. They literally kill only for the skins. So I don't think so. I mean, it's still a very niche market. There's not that many companies using it. And there's so much waste, and there's such a huge tons of waste that once they get into the ocean, they provoke even more waste, because they're working with the CO2 of the water, and they're polluting they're polluting the sea, because most of the time those boats which are fishing, they just throw the waste into the water. So definitely, I don't think there would be a risk in there at all. Thank you.
So your question was basically around whether we have a study on this. It is a practice-based project, and that's quite important, I think, because it reveals different details about the issues and the ways that you can think or produce. There's a couple of examples I could bring, but one is we really wanted to work locally. So the idea that we would provide the textiles for the participants, we had to kind of try and get into local fabrics, and that already shows quite a lot of difference in how you have to produce. But it also means that you really have a couple of challenges, because the idea in Rwanda, for example, to hand paint the fabrics is because there is no printers in the country. The idea of screen printers in Bangladesh was mostly because that's the more common form of printing there. But what I want to really kind of highlight is that projects like these, and it is a design probe. And I think the design probe allows all of the participants to kind of start thinking into that direction, and therefore it's a provocation to kind of evolve our thinking together, rather than coming up with numbers that you can then present and hope for offering a solution. But I think what also is important is that this idea of sharing is really central. And I think kind of making people aware, especially young design students, that they could possibly share their designs offers them a challenge, and even giving them a contract. Most of them don't read a contract before they go out into industry. Confronting them with those realities and understanding that there's such principles maybe in the future of fashion where you can have shared ownership or ownership over time. I think that introducing them to such ideas or systems is for me more important than having the correct numbers. But it would be, of course, interesting to see if someone has a study about how many globally, how many fashion collectives are there and actually producing already, because I think that could be a very simple way out of overproduction, to be honest, if we gave them the room to support their local communities.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. But it's a very down-to-earth question for Cédric. But then maybe I can add, elaborate a little bit on what has been said in this past answer. For Cédric, I just wanted to know, maybe it's very ignorant, why specifically denim, I can imagine, and why specifically trousers, or also it's about denim garments in general. And if I can just add something that came to my mind about collectivism in fashion, it's true. There is also culture. There, so many people. I want to have my own brand, or want to make something new and want to make it sustainable. But maybe the idea that you can go and work with others, and instead of 10 people having 10 brands, you have 10 people having one brand, or maybe not even a brand. That's also helpful to what we were a bit discussing before, to make less. But thank you, Cédric.
Okay. Yeah. So why denim? There are two reasons for that. One is it's a product that is often talked about when we are speaking about sustainability. There's a lot of communication on it and a lot of brands speaking about the emissions they can reduce, etc. And we want to check that as well. So the whole LCA is also reviewed, for example. It's really done in a scientific way. It's not done in an ISO way, because then we needed 3 reviewers, and that would have cost us 20,000 euros to get that fixed. So we got it reviewed externally, but once. And another reason why denim is it's cotton, and that is today one of the more successful recycling materials, you could say, next to polyesters and some specific nylons. And that's because cotton is more valuable, and there is a lot of it. And so that's also why. The benefit as well, because the fact that we didn't use a bleached denim, for example, also allows you to have a rough idea what a normal pair of trousers would represent, because it would be close to it, except for some grams less. Of the normal trousers weights a little bit less than a denim, but for the rest it's quite equivalent now in this case. And so it was also a unit product that could allow us to have a rough estimation then next to it for other similar products.
Thank you. Any other comment or question? Actually, I had also a question for you, Cédric. How did you start it? So the technology, where is it coming from? Was it funded also by Europe or locally, or was it a genius in his bath, or how did you start?
It's the theory behind Ressortexs is active disassembly. And that's a research scope that you can find in industrial design engineering. So MIT worked on this. You have Cordoba in London that is really famous. Had a lot of, I think most of the papers on active disassembly. And the principle of active disassembly is that you redesign the joining techniques like screws or glues in such a way that they can detach or reverse without manual interference. So most of the time we are speaking about shape memory, alloys or polymers that then the screw of the screw disappears, and then it's just a little stick and it falls out of a product. Most of the research was done on computers or phones, because then you can reach more easily precious metals. And so we just translated, I just translated this principle on textile goods. And then now, it's a team. We raised mainly subsidies, so locally in Flanders. We raised now this year 1 million, and then now we are back in, we're going on to the equity investment road. So it's going to be a tough road to raise continuously more to be able to build out this whole ecosystem.
Wow. Yeah, we saw in the previous session that one of the gaps is also that there is a lot of innovation, creativity, there is new technology, but often the big labels are have still not the courage to invest in it. So do you experience that also as a problem, or is it easily to sell your technology to existing labels?
Getting in touch with the brands is easy, at least for us. Most of the brands got in touch with us. So the 25 pilots, I think that the biggest ones, we never reached out to them. the silo structure and the hierarchy in those huge groups, because an Inditex or a Nike, it's multinationals. It's really complex. That's another story. What we have today still is a misconception on the economic reality of circularity, because a lot of brands had a lot of capsule collections on sustainable materials, etc., and never validated or never understood that it's not more expensive to make sustainable, but that it's cost saving and risk saving. And so that's something that is coming in. And so I hope that this will also help to get circularity higher in the hierarchy, so that we don't need to do the groundwork, but that we can tap in higher with people that have mandates and power as well on them to push those things through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we also work together with Centexbel, for example, for the development. Little detail, but important to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because you mentioned the big brands, and actually within the Herewear project, we really chose to work with SMEs. To see, okay, they can work at small scale, they are more flexible, and then we can prove it's possible, and hopefully in this way also motivate the bigger brands.
Yeah.
But we also are working really with SMEs.
Yeah, true. But because it's at the end of the life cycle, but if you have innovations that is another part of the value chain, then they need to also incorporate that in their business. But indeed, it's different when you work with SMEs. Yeah. Okay. Final comments from the rest of the panel. Do you like to say something? No, to conclude. I think that, first I want to congratulate you all, because, it's amazing to see how creativity and innovation is evolving. And if we look even 2 years back, maybe it's also because of the pandemic that it got boosted, but it's really amazing to see how many people are looking for solutions for the problem that the fashion industry is facing. And that gives hope. That gives hope. And I'm really, really happy with your presentations. And thank you also for the audience for your participation and your questions.